Hello, everyone. Welcome to CXO Spice. CXO Spice is a platform for thought leaders to share their point of view on innovation and explain how to make it happen in real world. I'm your host, Helen Yu, and today we're diving into the future of digital trust. Joining us is Adrian Baschnonga, Insight Director for Global TMT at EY. Adrian, welcome to CXO Spice Show.
Thanks very much, Helen. Great to be here today and looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, likewise. So before we dive into our discussion, Adrian, let's have you introduce yourself and your role at EY.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I'm a director of insights in the global TMT team for EY, based out of London, and really run a lot of our insights, our research programs, covering what happens in the telecom sector, but also looking at technology and media. So that can be primary research in terms of customer surveys, consumers and enterprises, but also engaging with the CXO community.
That's wonderful. So to have you here, the EY Global Digital Home Report caught my eyes recently. It highlights that trust is becoming more important for people when choosing streaming platforms. So, Adrian, how can streaming services build and keep that trust in such a competitive market?
Absolutely, Helen. It's a really interesting finding in this year's study, actually, because in previous years, things like original content, exclusive content, they're very important factors. This year, we're seeing that trust is rising up the rankings, if you like. And I think that kind of reflects that consumers, they want some more pricing predictability. We've seen a lot of price hikes in the last few months, over the last year, etc. And so that pricing message, that's crucial to sort of building trust, if you like, and also thinking about personalization. And that's really going beyond just the content aspect of the user experience in streaming, but thinking about the whole customer journey. So whether that's the onboarding experience, having the right customer care that meets customer needs, and also extends to things like catering to the frequency, the timing, the method of communication with individual customers. And I think looking at, the experience in those ways, and improving the experience in those ways can really be a route to building better levels of trust.
Well, that's a great segue to our next question, right? With 26% households still facing regular internet issues, what should broadband providers do to improve reliability and meet customer needs?
That's a really interesting question because each year in our survey, we find that 1/4 of households, they struggle with their connection. They have an unreliable connection often or very often. And I think there for service providers, for connectivity providers, it's about building a message that isn't just predicated on a fast speed or a speed promise, but really looks at the reliability aspect of the connection. And there it's important to be proactive in terms of advice around things like router quality, in terms of maximizing the best signal inside your home, and just being able to talk confidently with customers, trying to identify where they're having problems, and just having a dialogue that's really designed to improve reliability and just go beyond a headline speed promise.
Yeah, I can relate to those incidents where the area I live only have one provider, and sometimes it's just, internet is shut down and for no reason that we don't get, heads up or anything. But that's being said, as you said, communication is really important, right? And then how you manage the customer experience can really build much better, much better his trust there. I also learned that the study actually talked about 43% of people expressed a desire for more time away from screens. How can digital service providers respect this need for digital detox while still meeting their business goals?
That's a really interesting question. And I think here we're really sort of in the territory of ambivalence. On the one hand, people are using digital ever more. But on the other hand, they have this reflection, this awareness that actually too much time online is detrimental to their mental health. And I think if you're a service provider, really communicating your value proposition in a way that doesn't um, promote always on as the only way that customers think about their online experiences, that's important, right? So being able to communicate family value propositions or communicate even with parents who may be worried about their children spending too much time online and building that into your service proposition, providing more education around the best ways of being online, for example. I think that's all messaging that will ultimately, build a better relationship with customers and provide reassurance to them. Because I think in recent years there are concerns amongst a lot of people that they just spend too much time online.
Yeah, myself included here. Do you ever have a downtime yourself? I have to force myself to use 1 hour in the day. There's no device whatsoever. And I find that when I'm in the gym or, playing pickleball or tennis, that's the time there's no device. I personally do not wear the device with, on me so that I would, get me off of off the internet.
Exactly, and it's an important thing to bear in mind, just being able to carve out that time when you're undertaking a different type of activity and you keep that in your daily program, that can be very important. And I think if you look at service providers in the market and the way that they're engaging with the public, with policymakers, etc., I think everyone's now aware that, looking at digital downsides and being able to have an honest dialogue about them is very important.
Absolutely. That's a great point. I also learned from the study that nearly half of the consumers are concerned about harmful content online. What measures can service providers take to address this issue, and how can they collaborate with regulators to ensure user protection? As a matter of fact, I was surprised to see only half of consumer. I thought this one would be 100% of consumers or 90%, right, are concerned about harmful content online.
That's again, and it's kind of related to the previous question. What's interesting there, if you break down the market by different types of customer, you can see that anxiety becomes a bit more elevated. So, for example, with families with children, it will be 70% plus who have this fear, this concern around what members of their household are encountering online. And I think, the first thing for service providers there to bear in mind is that this is a very complex area and that even definitions of harmful content and online safety, they're evolving all the time because the nature of the threat and the feelings of anxiety are also evolving. So I think for service providers, one important action is to have regular dialogue with your peer group in the market. And I think that's something that we're already starting to see in some countries, service providers building common positions on these topics, if you like. And that provides then a very sound platform, if you like, to progress into dialogue with the regulator, with the policymaker, and really focusing on building consensus while also recognizing that what might have been an effective position to take 1 year ago may not be fit for purpose, 6 months down the line. So constantly kind of revisiting your assumptions, your position on this topic, I think is very important.
Mhm. Is there any difference among each of the different vertical when you're trying to collaborate with regulators? Um,
Yeah, I think it's about looking at having that holistic view of lots of different types of provider in the digital home, whether that's a device manufacturer, a connectivity provider, a streaming provider, and actually trying to build that consensus a little bit outside of your own vertical. Having those discussions, I think, is very important.
Okay, very good point. The study also points to 7 different consumer groups in digital home market. How can service providers tailor their offerings and marketing to each of these different groups?
That's a really interesting question as well, because what we found in our research is that there are many different types of customers, consumers inside the digital home, and each of them have, specific needs, There are opportunities there for service providers, but also challenges that they face that service providers need to be aware of. So, one group, premium and pleased, these customers are very receptive to cross-sell and upsell of different products and services from the same provider. So they're a very attractive segment in terms of buying bundles. But even though they're prepared to spend more and they see value in those premium packages, I think the ability for service providers to change and evolve those premium propositions, that's important because these customers are very well informed. If they see a better offer from another provider, they're very willing to switch. So making sure that your premium propositions are up to date and can be customized, I think that's very important for that group. Second group, which is quite a large group, digital devotees. Again, they tend to be very tech centric. They tend to be receptive to new types of value proposition, which is good news for providers. But they're also very focused on the customer promise. And they're very interested in ensuring that the price promise, for example, the performance promise, that it stands up to scrutiny. So for this group, I think service providers really need to double down on what kind of guarantees, service guarantees they're providing, because these customers, they're loyal, but they're also demanding. And then we have a savers group. They tend to be very informed and well educated about the different offers in the market because they've been looking, basically for the most effective way of spending their money. But they also tend to over-index and be more sensitive to things like digital detox, spending too much time online, harmful content. So for this group, providing an attractive price point, very important, but also making sure that you have strong security credentials. And then we have a group called Content Comes First. They're really interested in the latest types of content, very receptive to media and entertainment offers that come with connectivity packages. But they sometimes struggle with their customer experiences. So reducing friction in customer journey is really important for that group. And then we have another group called Beyond the Bundle. They're interesting. They tend to be younger than average. Again, they have quite a lot of appetite for digital. Trouble is, they don't want to feel locked into a certain type of bundle. And for this group, being able to self-serve and to customize, that's really important for them. And then finally, we've got two groups that tend to struggle a little bit more with customer experiences when engaging with customer support. We've got one group called disengaged users, and they tend to be maybe a little bit detached from relationships with service providers. So for this group, it's really important the service providers make their value propositions clear, make them compelling, because this group, they've got needs, they've got demands, but they tend to be a little bit latent and untapped. And then finally, we've got a group called Drowning in Digital. They tend to be older than average. They tend to struggle to get the right kind of customer support. They struggle to interpret value propositions. They're not so sure which is the best service to meet their needs. And so here it's about providing better levels of assistance on the path to purchase during sales, but also support interactions to really explain value propositions better to this group.
Well, interesting. I love the naming convention you assigned to each group because it's so vivid, right? And just I can imagine each of the group. And then as I start thinking about the people in my network, I can put them in each of the boxes. Quite interesting and accurate. And then here it comes to the most important topic here, right? Over half of the consumers are worried about that AI will make online content less trustworthy. So how can digital service providers use AI responsibly while keeping users' trust?
And that's important to bear in mind because, we're talking about trust today, and there are some legacy or long-standing fears, if you like, that customers, that households have. And the challenge with AI is that there's a lot of opportunity it brings, but maybe people's first reaction to it is that they've read that AI can make online content less trustworthy, or they will struggle to tell apart something authentic from something that may be fake. And I think in that light, it's absolutely essential for service providers to engage with their customers, to be able to reassure them, and ultimately to recognize the fact that AI needs to be explainable. Um, if we think about how that sort of digital privacy, data privacy challenge is evolving over time, and even from a regulatory perspective, there's more impetus and more energy now being put into the explainability of AI. And that's something that came out very strongly in our survey that customers want service providers to explain how they're using AI in the support experience, in the personalization of services. So having that dialogue with customers about AI specifically, I think very important, especially when we think about the opportunities that AI can play in customer support, customer assistance there. You know, we have a horizon of, almost unlimited possibilities, but just making sure that you're able to explain clearly and effectively how you're using AI, really essential going forward.
That's a very important point, Adrian. And especially when these companies or providers want to collect data from consumers, right? Read an article about automaker at one point collecting your driving information without people's consent, right? Sometimes they send you a small print. You should really read them clearly. And from consumer perspective, we should also own that responsibility, understand exactly how our data, personal data, is being collected, and then ensure that we understand what that entails. But as you said, AI making that explainable, that transparency is so important as a foundation to build that trust with consumers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, the study also suggests that younger users are more willing to share in personal data for better services, and I'll say maybe for convenience, right? And how can providers make sure data sharing feel like a good deal while also protecting privacy?
Yes, and it's an important balancing act, really, to be able to explain the benefits of data sharing. And ultimately, that should lead to um, some communication around the benefits of more personalized, more customized services that are available to younger users. So for example, that could be a simpler menu of products and services to choose from based upon what your service provider already knows about you, or the kinds of offers and inducements to take on an additional product or service that would resonate with you, again, based upon the kind of person that you are. So I think really sort of being able to convert, data sharing into upside for the customer, absolutely vital, and just making that clear from the outset.
Yeah, that's very important, right? And if you ever been on a call with a bank or with service provider, they keep passing you from one line to the next, and then you'd have to repeat yourself. That could be frustrating experience. However, right, if they leverage the information they know about you and then accelerate the speed of service, that could be fantastic.
That's a really interesting point. That actually the more that a provider knows about you, you can have a more personalized experience, and that should be a more frictionless experience ultimately. And that's very important in the context of this study because the number of people who struggle with customer support interactions and being passed around between different channels, that's also something that comes out very strongly in the study.
Exactly. The last question here, Adrian, is that I learned that telecom companies are seen as the most trusted with data. That's quite interesting to me, right? And especially by older users. How can other organization and learn from that experience and then use that to stand out in the digital home market?
Yes, it's an interesting finding that because I think, if you're a telco, historically you may have felt that other types of provider in the digital home maybe have more mind share with customers. But actually in our survey, the ability of telcos to look after, to safeguard data comes out very strongly. They're seen as relatively more trusted. And I think that really unlocks for them a position in the digital home where the product and service portfolio can extend into new domains. Maybe that could be to do with cloud storage. It could be to do with smart home technology, security services inside the home, for example. So I think if you have that mind share around trust and security, that can mean a lot of upside in terms of looking at your service portfolio, being able to expand it intelligently in new directions. And even if you look at, telcos in the enterprise market, for example, they've been able to capitalize on that sense of trust as they, innovate their service portfolios. So I think, if you're a service provider in another vertical, you can certainly gain from having that trusted mind share.
Mhm. That's a great advice here. Thank you, Adrian, for sharing these invaluable insights on the digital trust. Here are actually 4 key takeaways from our conversation today. Number 1, trust is paramount in the digital landscape. Trust, as you mentioned, has become a critical factor for consumers when choosing streaming platform and digital services. Providers must prioritize building and maintaining trust to succeed in competitive market. Number 2 is balancing digital engagement with detox. We mentioned about with 43% of people desiring more time away from screens, digital service providers actually face the challenge of respecting users' need for digital detox when still achieving their business objectives. Number 3 is content monetization and safety concerns. Nearly half of the consumers are worried about harmful content online. Service providers need to implement effective measures to address the issue and collaborate with regulators to ensure user protection. Lastly is the personalization and data privacy trade-offs, right? Younger users show more willingness to share personal data in exchange for better services. I love the 7 groups that you talked about, and then how providers can really strike the balance between offering personalized experience and maintaining strong privacy protections to cater to diverse consumer preferences. Thank you, Adrian, for highlighting the complex landscape of digital trust and emphasizing the need for service providers to adapt to changing consumer expectations while addressing key concerns in the digital home market. Thank you, EY, for such a meaningful study. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Stay hungry, stay bold, and stay grateful.